Yeah. So, yeah, it's very interesting. We were just talking a little bit about our love of red zone versus watching live football, and it's just it's such a change when it's constant fantasy and a little less worried about the entire game. But it sure makes it a lot easier to follow your fantasy teams without a doubt, right, Billy?
It does, and that's what's great about the Thursday and the Sunday and Monday night game. It's the only game on, and you can just focus on that for that time being and everything.
Yeah, without a doubt. All right, well, we're ready to rock.
All right.
Go DiSTRiCT, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT DiSTRiCT, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
So welcome back to the GOAT DiSTRiCT. We've been on a tear in terms of having awesome guests, and tonight is no different. Billy Wasosky joins us. Billy's practically, I bet on the, if we had to do a Mount Rushmore of GOAT DiSTRiCT guests, he's probably there by now. He's one of the first high-stakes guests we had on when we started bringing on high-stake player after high-stake player. Billy's one of the best players I know. I think he's one of the best drafters in America, and he's got the receipts to prove it. He's an NFFC Hall of Famer. You're fourth right now in the all-time earnings in NFFC, Billy. Am I correct on that?
Yes, correct.
He's fourth all-time in the NFFC earnings, and he took down the Rotowire Online Championship last year, which was an awesome accomplishment for him. We had him on last spring. So it's been a little while. We have a lot to talk about tonight. And welcome back, Billy. We're happy to have you, or I'm happy to have you tonight.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Theo. Again, appreciate the kind words, and it's always great to be on here. Love talking football, and we're getting close. Got about a little over a month, and before that, preseason we started, and we're in the thick of it now. So I'm ready to roll.
We're about a week away from when some of these camps start. So it's super exciting. They don't all start on the same day, but you'll start seeing a lot more news coming out. Some of it's nothing to look at. Some of it's very interesting, but it's going to be hot and heavy. It's just the news comes at you fast. How do you filter, the BS from the actual news you need to pay attention to? Is there any kind of rules you follow?
Not really. I think the fact that, I hate to say it, it's like experience. I've done this for so long. I kind of just go with what there's certain people you trust in the media and Twitter and everything else, and certain people you don't. You listen to everything, but some of the stuff is just kind of that, you got to, that's the key to this, is feeding through. When I first started playing this, we did things about the USA Today. You kept the score, and there was no computers and all that. And that's when you really had to do your homework. But now, everybody's got the same information. It's all out there, but you just, you do the very best you can with it. And I just following the right people and, kind of filtering through as best you can. That's the best I can say about it.
So I don't know if you saw the report today. There's a beat writer, a Chiefs wire guy, pretty well known, saying he's projecting Ronald Jones to be a potential cut. Is that something we should be paying attention to, or is that just one guy's opinion?
I think that's one guy's opinion. I would be shocked by that. We've seen things before that have happened, but I would be stunned if that happened. I think they brought him in for a reason. Ronald Jones is not a bad running back. For fantasy, he's, he doesn't catch passes and what we all love to have. But, there's a very clear path for him to be, the bell cow and the goal line guy. So there is some value to him.
Yeah, it would make no sense if he's not the goal line guy, because we've never really seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that role.
Right.
Jerick McKinnon is a pass catching back. And Pacheco doesn't really seem like the kind of guy that's going to come in and do that. He seems like more of a special teams guy. So yeah, that's the kind of, and Twitter kind of amplifies these things where it used to be you just read one guy's opinion. It would be like a blurb. Now it's like a blurb, and you'll see, 30 people giving their opinion about that one particular blurb. So it's kind of an echo chamber at this time of the summer. So getting back to the summer, how does your process play out? How often are you drafting, and when do you really, turn on the jets and get into high gear in terms of drafting more often?
My whole process starts around mid-May to early June, and I kind of break that every team down. I take every team, and I wait till then because the draft is over and the trades have gone through, and every team's pretty much solidified. And I basically allocate targets and rush attempts, that kind of thing for every team, and it takes a while. It's about a 45-minute per team process. So I do a couple teams per day during the summer. I'm a teacher, so I'm off, so it's nice. But I'm done by mid-June, and I try to hold off as long as I can to draft. I do a lot of draft champions, but I don't do. I think I did my first OC this year. Well, I did it. I did it in early June, but it gets hard because you're every night you're like, oh, there's my cat in the background. Every night it's you're busy. You want to do something. You want to keep going, but then like we were talking earlier, there's so much. If you have all these 350s, and then you get into the big drafts in New York and Vegas, and it just becomes a lot, and you're like, wow, I got a lot to manage here. So I'm going to start hitting this really hard next month. First week of August, I'll start hitting it a lot harder than I have, but I'm doing probably 1 to maybe 2 a week right now.
1 to 2 a week. And then when you say you kick it up another notch in August, you might add an additional draft or 2 a week.
Yeah, I'll probably do anywhere from 10 to 12 online championships during August, somewhere in that ballpark. Again, I'm trying to keep those lower because I'm definitely going a little harder at the prime times and stuff this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. And when you took down the online championship, when did you draft that team?
August 13th.
August 13th. So Billy, come on, that's pretty early in August. That means you got to kind of kick it up a notch, in my opinion.
Yeah, yes, but I think it's an August thing. I don't know. That's just super. You can have it from anywhere. I mean, it's not like I drafted that team that night and was like, oh my gosh, this team. We've all drafted teams that just look like they're lights out, and for whatever reason, whether it's injuries or whatever, they don't pan out. But that one happened too. It was great. It stayed very healthy all year. I had very little to do with it as far as managing it. I had a really good draft. Cordero Patterson was the only guy I really picked up that was anything that helped me down the stretch.
And when you start drafting all these teams, and you mentioned, you're going to be doing the online championship, you're going to be doing the prime time, you're going to be doing classics, you're going to be doing the supers, you're going to be doing some of the higher stakes formats in the NFFC. Do you start tracking your percentages across all contests and look and see, maybe I have, I'm 35% on this guy, maybe I'm only 15% on this guy, and I want to get a little more of this guy exposure wise, and maybe I need to take it back a notch on this guy. Do you start tracking those sort of things, or is that something that doesn't really play into it with you?
I don't really track the actual number for the percent, but I kind of have a good gauge of who I've taken. I'll tell you right now, I have no problem telling you. Like I think I have Stephon Diggs on over half my teams, my online teams right now. And I love Stephon Diggs, but maybe I'll pump the brakes going forward just a little bit and then pick him up back later, that kind of thing.
I have an awful lot of Stephon Diggs, so I like being on the same page with you. It's kind of hard to walk away from him because once the big three go, he's like in my opinion, the next one. He's on a kind of his own little island.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's interesting because when you draft early, if you have conviction on someone, potentially he rises up. Maybe there's reports in camps about, Stephon Diggs, pushing for 30% target share or something. And he pushes up and he's locked in, at 106. So maybe you end up getting a little value on him. And I think that it's like when you go all in on a guy, you're going all in on a guy who you play in a wide receiver heavy format, the NFFC, and a guy who you're very confident about the role. It's not like you're going all in on a guy who, we both like Travis Etienne, but there's question marks about the offense. There's question marks potentially about, how big his role will be.
Right.
Maybe he would be a guy that you wouldn't want that much exposure to. So I think it kind of cuts both ways. It's a very interesting thing to talk about with some of the more successful players, the ownership percentage. And when you're doing these builds, what's your approach with the one-off positions lately? Are you looking to draft 2 QBs, 2 tight ends in some of these early builds with the early waiver wire run, or is it something where you're willing to go, with 1 QB, 1 tight end?
It depends on the QB and the tight end. If I draft a Pitts or Kelsey or Andrews, I'm more apt to only take 1. Just take them and I'm fine with it. Same with the quarterbacks. And I actually have pretty diversified pretty well my quarterbacks so far. But most of the time, I normally take a backup quarterback just to have one. I think it's such an important position. I'll just take somebody late, but it depends who I get. If I get somebody like a Derek Carr, I might be more apt to take somebody a little quicker just to have, just in case it doesn't pan out. Where, if you take a Mahomes or a Herbert, you're a little more confident in those picks. So,
yeah. So you let draft capital kind of decide, whether you're going to go with a single at the position. Yeah. For me, I've had a couple of builds this summer where I'm going with a single QB. I like to have another dice roll running back, especially last summer we saw what happened with Akers, we saw what happened with Dobbins, and to have more exposure to some handcuffs and some of those maybe potential interesting third string running backs late. But I agree with you; it should be kind of draft capital dependent. If you're taking your first tight end in like the 10th round, it's a lot different than taking Kelsey at the 2-3 turn, something like that. Now, with the NFFC, if anybody is unfamiliar with it, there's a KDS system where you have a preference to your draft pick slot, and they generate it based on people's preferences. For these early drafts, are you mixing up your KDS, or are you pretty consistent with the pick you're using?
I've been drafting from the back a lot in the 9, 10, 11 area. I like that right now back there because I think it leaves your drafts a whole lot more flexible, how you can build your roster. I think you get penned in at the front, especially if you take, let's say you have the one, you take Jonathan Taylor, and then it comes back, and it's like you got to make a decision there. The 3-4 turn is pretty much, there's receivers there, but it's like the receivers, in my opinion, fall off right before that. So it's like a bad zone for me. I don't like being pinned in on the ends as much. I just don't like being at 1 or 12 very often, just because it can dictate a lot of things where people, they can see what your weaknesses are and they can pick you off as they're coming down. But I like the 9, 10, 11 spots. I like I said, Diggs is back there. You got some good receivers. You can generally get like a Diggs and a Barkley or a Diggs and a Swift or something like that, which is a great start. And then the third round's wide open. You can go, you go with Michael Pittman, you can go with ETN, you go Mark Andrews. I mean, and then I just think there's a lot more flexibility from the back right now.
Yeah, I think you have a great point about if the 101 in the NFFC, it kind of handcuffs you a little bit because Michael Pittman is one of the more appealing wide receivers going around 24. If you're a Jonathan Taylor guy, I don't know how comfortable I'd be having 2 Colts as the start. I think that's a real tough putt with Matt Ryan as the QB. And then, you're kind of sitting there looking at like a T Higgins, maybe pushing an AJ Brown or a DJ Moore up. So it's a little difficult because again, with the 3rd round reversal, you've got to wait on that 3rd round pick. So you better really nail that 2nd round pick if that's a wide receiver. So it's very alluring getting that top running back. But in my opinion, you're kind of setting yourself up for an RB start almost, just based on the structure of the NFFC right now. And of course that could change as the summer goes along with ADP moving around. What are your general thoughts on the early drafts you've seen in the NFFC? Maybe some takeaways on any surprises you've had, whether it's on a player or kind of structure, and just kind of your early thoughts on pretty much anything in general here. Guys, where they're going, you think it's appropriately priced, and basically players' approaches to it as well.
Yeah, the NFFC, the first 2 rounds are pretty much locked in for the most part. People shuffle around here and there, of course, every now and then. And this is why I like being at the back in the 3rd round, because every now and then you do get that Pittman to fall through. Or not that I'm a huge fan of him, but I've gotten Debo in the 3rd round. In which, I'm not a huge fan, but, as your 3rd player, you could do worse. The 4th round in the NFFC it's the receiver round. Like from 4-1 to 4-12, it's just yellow across the board. I mean, it's just pound. And early on, you saw the quarterbacks kind of flying in there. And you'll get into a draft sometimes where you have Herbert or Mahomes getting to the 4th. But now they're actually falling to the sometimes late 5th, early 6th. So the quarterbacks are starting to fall. It all depends what draft you're in. Sometimes the quarterbacks go fast. Sometimes they, people wait on them. The first round is kind of all over the place. I mean, I think the most polarizing player right now is Derrick Henry.
Yeah,
you'll see him go at 7, and he'll go at 14, and you don't see that very often. I don't see that very often from year to year. You have a guy in the first round, he might go 8 to 10 or something, 8 to 11, but 7 to 14 is a big spread. And people either love Derrick Henry or they hate him. And I've taken him once when I got him at 14, but I won't take him at 7. But you'll see Dalvin Cook and Eckler. I've seen Eckler fall late, Dalvin Cook fall late. Swift, he'll go anywhere from 6 to 12 or 13. So
it's pretty flat this year. I mean, I think in a way, in my opinion, you see some real strength at the beginning of the 2nd round, because the guy that I might value at the beginning of the 2nd round, you might value at 8 overall.
Yes.
So
right.
I think it's interesting this year. And one guy I want to get your opinion on. You're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. With Mitch Trubisky looking like he's going to be the QB there, and the offense changing, I wanted to get your opinion on Najee Harris and also Deontay Johnson. Najee Harris right now, and I'm referencing, if anybody wants to look it up, it's free on the NFFC site. I'm referencing the last 11 days of Rotowire online championships. Najee Harris is 7 overall. Do you think that that's an appropriate price for him? Or do you think that that's a price he's going to kind of struggle to live up to? Or do you think it's about fair for a running back of his volume?
I do not have a grade on him of mid-first rounder. Let's put it that way. I think he's going to fall off this year. I love the guy. He's fantastic. He's a bulldog. I mean, he does what you need to do. But last year I watched so many games, and there were so many times where Ben would snap the ball, and the line was so bad, he would just turn and quickly, and Najee's facing Ben, catches the ball, and his backs, and they just get blasted in the back by the defenders. And I mean, he took a beating last year, and I was surprised he held up the entire season, truthfully. And they can't do that again to him. And they've already come out and said they're gonna limit his carries, not limit, but they're gonna try to get somebody else in there. And I wouldn't be surprised if like a Latavius Murray or somebody like that ends up signing there as a backup going forward. But I don't think he's going to get the catches, because I think Trubisky and if Pickett comes in, they're both mobile, so they can run. They can do their thing, and they can. They're not going to be as quick to dump off to Najee. They can scramble a little bit, and they can find somebody downfield a little more. So I don't think he gets the catches. He'll still get some of the rushes, but this offense could be a little tricky. And you said Deontay Johnson. He's a wild card for me. I don't know what to do with him yet, because everybody's like, oh, Ben didn't have an arm, da 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 da. But part of Johnson's allure is the fact that he gets so much volume, and I don't know if that's going to go away. The new quarterback, sometimes they latch onto somebody else. I still think he's definitely the alpha in the offense for the receivers, but I still feel comfortable taking him around, wide receiver 15 or 16.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, and I think Deontay right now is I wouldn't say that he's like a slam dunk, but I'd say he's very appropriately priced. Mm-hmm. Targets are earned. It's still the same coaching staff with him. We've seen him win in a number of ways in the NFL. Yeah. People talk about the timely drops. That can also improve. But I think like where he's going, it could kind of be an overcorrection. I know there's some analysts who are like really down on Deontay this year, but I don't know. I think he's very, very good at football. And I think he will, return value, like you said, at that wide receiver 15. It doesn't take a whole lot for him to beat that ADP based on the kind of targets we think he's going to get. And also, like his ADOT could go up a little bit. I think that, like
definitely
Roethlisberger was, so much dump offs. I think Mitch could potentially open things up a little bit more. I mean, nobody's going to call him a great quarterback by any means, but he is younger. He's definitely more mobile. So that'll be definitely an interesting offense to track. When you're doing your builds, do you start trying to have any correlation or potential stacks as you start drafting? Is that something that you're looking to do this year, or is it just kind of when it happens, it happens?
It's more when it happens, it happens. I don't chase those. I think what happens is when you start chasing stacks, you end up you're hurting value falling to you just because you feel like you have to have this person. I'll draft somebody maybe early on. I'll give you an example. I drafted Diggs the one draft, and then it came out. Actually, it was really late. I was at 10, and Josh Allen fell to 410, which normally he doesn't fall that far. Yeah, and then I was like, this, I'm not going to have many Josh Allen shares just because I'm not going to grab the quarterback early. But this one, I'm going to do that, And I have Higgins on that team, so it's like that. I'm sure you're aware that Monday night game is the final game of the year, and that could be, that's going to decide some game. And there's a lot of firepower in that game.
That game is the most tilting game, maybe in the history of Monday Night Football, because you have so much money on the line in underdog right now, where people are going all in on that game. And you're seeing it in the high stakes as well. People are just in fuego, and it's not funny because I have exposure to that game as well. But it happens to be where we could see bad weather in that game, and it could just be so it's just like a big dice roll with that. I mean, there's safer ways to play that final weekend in terms of weather. I mean, you could go with the all LA game and not have to worry about it at all. But we'll go with a cold weather city. But it could be, if the weather holds up, that game could be like, it could play out where it's like a 38-35 game where it helps decide tons of big money leagues. So it's super, super interesting to me. So basically, if you take a Devontae Adams, are you more inclined to take a Derek Carr as your QB that draft? Do you start thinking about it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I've done that before where I've thought about doing that. And then what will happen is I'll have a quarterback that will fall to me. Let's say a Kyler Murray falls in like the late 7th or something, whatever. Well, or actually maybe into the 8th. And I can't pass that up, so then there that goes. But yeah, I mean, I've thought about that it's normally your first receiver, your first couple receivers you're looking at the most. And I've done it a few times this year, but I normally don't chase stacks like that. The stack I had last year in the online championship, Burrow and Chase, I didn't chase that at all. I mean, Burrow was my, he was my number one quarterback, but I got him in the 10th round. I didn't even think about Chase. I had
QB 12-ish,
QB 13. Yeah, right. And I had CD on that team, and I had Devontae on that team. So I just took Burrow because he was the next guy. I waited on quarterback, and it happened to work out. So.
For sure. Last year, we saw a few situations where wide receiver 2s on the same offense ended up smashing. You mentioned Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase was going behind T. Higgins. Nobody was mad about drafting T. Higgins last year, but anybody would trade him for Jamar Chase last year. Brandon Ayuk was going ahead of Deebo Samuel. And then the big one, Robert Woods, was going a few picks ahead of Cooper Kupp.
Right.
In your process, are you keeping this in the back of your head? And how can we, sift out the better wide receiver to draft on some of these teams?
I mean, I personally think, and I love Chase, I'm always being indebted to Chase, but I think Higgins is the better value right now, just comparatively speaking, where you can get them. I know you guys got Higgins last night late in the 3rd round. That's phenomenal value. Yeah. Chase in the middle first, him in the late 3rd. I'll take him all day long. So yeah, I mean, there's certain guys, look at Minnesota, you got, of course you got Jefferson and Thielen. That's a big gap there. Not that I think Thielen's going to be better than Jefferson by any stretch, but I'd have to really think about that one as far as who, if you gave me some names, I could go through that, I think. But
yeah, I'll throw out a couple because I'm actually working on an article about this, and I'm just interested to see some people's thoughts because, like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams is very tilting. Yeah. It seems like one's going to pay off. You can go with, I think Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson's interesting to me because Garrett Wilson's super cheap right now. But you can find many of these situations. What would be your lean with the Chargers wide receivers in terms of, is there one more appealing to you right now?
I mean, it depends. There's certain drafts where I've seen Mike Williams go before Keenan.
Yeah.
But most of the time, Mike Williams goes about a half a round after Keenan, and that would probably be my preference. I got him pretty close. Keenan's getting a little bit older. I mean, he's another year older. He looked like he slowed down a little bit last year. Started to slow down a little. He's always been a great route runner. That's his game. He's never been a speed guy. But Mike Williams he's the total upside for sure. He's got an injury history. Keenan's got an injury history. So, that opens the door for Josh Palmer, which is, he's a nice guy to be grabbing now. But probably Mike Williams would be the guy I'd be leaning towards.
So if anybody's listening to the show, your takeaway is you need to start taking Josh Palmer late. Billy just let that one go. I'll throw out Denver. Denver's an interesting one to try to price right now with Sutton and Judy. I'm on the Sutton train, but I think I'm willing to be wrong. Where I think it could be Judy, and Judy could end up being kind of a value. Is that a situation that you're looking to add exposure to, or do you see any as that is just kind of a headache that you might want to avoid?
I prefer Sutton over Judy as well. However, I see some guys in that range where Sutton goes, and there's other guys I'd almost rather have because they're kind of like the only guy in their offense. Denver's very tricky this year. I think this is going to be one of the offenses. Obviously, this offense could be very great. I mean, with Russ, the receiving core, you got two great running backs. It's all set up for them. But, the thing Russ will have on this team that he's never had before is a third receiver. Like, he's going to have Tim Patrick, who's, he's the quiet guy behind the scenes, but he does a lot of the dirty work. They have a good tight end. So I lean towards Sutton, but I'm not crazy about where he's going. I wish he was going just a little bit later. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's he's definitely moving up. I drafted with Nelson Sousa last night. We got him in the 4th round, which I think was good. I've seen him go even higher in FFPC drafts. I think he's gotten pushed up into the 3rd occasionally. I think he's got the touchdown upside. But Judy was a guy that we were really drafting last year. I know some really sharp people were all over him last year as we got into like late August, early September. I know I drafted him once or twice, and I felt good about it. It'll be interesting to see the way it plays out. I think that's the kind of offense where they have a big range of possibilities, where I think there's a chance that Denver just goes nuts this year and scores a ton. And I think there's also a chance where maybe they don't meet expectations and they still win a ton of games, but it's not quite as fantasy friendly. So it's definitely one where I don't want to go all in on, but I definitely want some exposure to. How about
that's where?
Oh, go ahead.
What I was going to say is that's where my gut's taken me on Denver. Is that while everything looks great, I could see it being them, and I know they play in the AFC West, and theoretically those games should be phenomenal to watch because there should be tons of points and everything. But Denver's got a very good defense, and I could totally see them getting up in a couple games, and they got Javonte, you got Melvin, Russ just doing little short stuff just to keep it close. So I could see that very much happening, and the Denver players could be a little bit of a disappointment, but like you said, Denver's a playoff team, they win games, that kind of thing.
How about two wide receiver cores that are a little tricky right now? Kansas City and the Green Bay Packers. I would say the Kansas City is definitely the more appealing passing game right now. Yeah. We like, obviously Patrick Mahomes is, I don't know how you're ranking him, but you can't really have him lower than QB 3 or 4. And you might have him QB 1 still. But there's some question marks. Sky Moore is interesting. Juju Smith-Schuster's there. There's some people on MVS right now. is that a wide receiver core where you almost want to treat it like an ambiguous backfield and get pieces of? Or do you think when it comes down to your, when it gets to mid-August to early September, do you think that there's going to be a guy that you're pounding the table for and trying to get a little more exposure to than maybe the others? And we could throw MVS out of this equation. I'm not sure your opinion on him. For me, I know that there's the beat reporters. I just have a hard time believing it. He never had a higher than, I believe his highest target share in Green Bay was like 15%. So it's hard for me to see a guy just changing, a little later, even though he's got a new QB and they certainly paid him.
Well, it's like, and I don't know if you saw the one beat writer, I think it was earlier back in like June, who said Mecole Hardman was the best receiver for Kansas City. So
I don't want to talk about Mecole. I just can't do it again.
I can't again either. I've been burned on that train way too many times. I think Juju's the obvious choice as well, obviously based on where he's going and his ADP right now. He's the number one receiver. This is Kelsey's team. We all know that. Kelsey's the number one target. But Juju's an interesting target because, we saw what he did a few years ago when he was healthy in Pittsburgh. He can play. I mean, he's a great possession receiver. And in that offense with Mahomes scrambling around, he could be good. He'd be the guy I'd be looking at the most for sure. Sky Moore's a rookie. We don't know exactly how much time he's going to get. They paid MVS a lot of money. They did do that. So we'll see if they're going to get him on the field too. So, but yeah, Juju would be the guy. But I'm not, again, Juju's kind of the last guy for me in the tier.
He's like the last of those interesting, like high-end wide receiver threes.
Yep.
Low-end wide. Yeah. You kind of feel like you're forced to draft him at times because of the big, huge tier break. It's more structural, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that he's maybe a guy that I've been fading that I need to kind of open up my eyes to a little bit more because we have seen him succeed multiple times. And again, it's Mahomes. So, I mean, there's a chance he really beats. And is the answer just draft Kelsey? Because Kelsey, I think, could have 160 targets this year.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. And, going back, I think Kelsey's the obvious choice. That's why he's going in the second round. I mean, Juju, though, going back to him, I think Juju would be a great flex. He's not a sexy flex. He's not – I don't think either one of us think Juju's going to erupt for 260 points or something like that this year in fantasy. But I don't think he's going to hurt you either. I think he could be a very consistent part of your team. And you mix them with some other guys that have more, higher upside.
How about the Green Bay Packers wide receivers? It's ugly. I mean, Allen Lazard, Christian Watson. I'm not gonna waste your time talking Sammy Watkins. Amari Rodgers is a little bit interesting. Is that something where you're looking to avoid it? Because at the end of the day, someone's going to produce, and we could throw Tunyon in that mix. As much as we love, and I know you're a fan of the running backs there, as much as they could become, a little more running back centric, it's Aaron Rodgers. He's going to target his wide receivers. Is there a particular way to play that right now? Is that one where maybe we want a little more information, even if you got to pay a little bit more for a guy, than to kind of throw darts at this point of the summer?
Yeah, I haven't really drafted much of the Packers wide receivers. My very first online championship, early June, I got Lazard in the 11th round, which I was like, okay, he was like my wide receiver 6 or something. And then I think I took like a 2-week break and I went back to a draft and he went like the 6th round. And I was like, oh shit.
I mean, Bill, you're setting ADP. You go away, you set the ADP, man. They're
11th round to 6th. But he I mean, just looking at it, we don't know Christian Watson. My daughter went to JMU, James Madison University, and that's who North Dakota State plays. I mean, and they're good, but it's Division I AA football. So there's probably gonna be a big learning curve. And Rodgers is very, you don't do what he does. If you run the wrong route or you drop passes, he's not throwing to you. So I'm a little worried about him. But like you said, he's got to throw to somebody. Now, Tunyon's an interesting one if he can. And, I don't know what the latest on him was. I heard he's possible he could be ready for week 1. Maybe he's not. He's an interesting play. And I've taken him a few times as my number 2 tight end just to see, because somebody's got to catch the football here. So
yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. It makes me like the running backs a little bit more because I think at the end of the day, I think Rodgers could just be a little more game manager, a little less gunslinger this year, a lot more dump offs. And I think that if we know Aaron Jones can produce, and we saw AJ Dillon produce as well, so it kind of makes me like those guys a little bit more. I find it hard to believe that Green Bay is going to really struggle to score. I think they'll figure it out. They're well coached, and Rodgers is a good enough quarterback. I just don't know if they're going to give you that many, potentially massive weeks. Lazard's a little interesting. I hate drafting those guys that you're drafting because of vacated targets and opportunity. It's kind of like it's part of the reason, not to get off subject, but Dalton Schultz, especially in the FFPC, where I play a lot more of, as well as the NFFC, you see Dalton Schultz just going really high. And I think it's basically because people are projecting him for a big target share. The guy had like 100 targets last year, but I don't know. I feel like you get yourself in trouble when you start chasing targets and you kind of ignore the profile of the player. Because I mean, Lazard, if Devontae Adams re-signed and he was still a Green Bay Packer, Lazard would be going where? The 12th?
Yeah. Late.
Yeah, super late. So definitely interesting. And shout out to the JMU Dukes headed to the Sun Belt.
Yes.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a fun little league. And now how are you handling unknown situations when you're drafting early? A guy like Alvin Kamara right now, it's kind of a litmus test. You look at him and you see either a potential massive opportunity. I've seen some high volume guys just drafting him nonstop lately. There's the thought is that he might avoid suspension to start the year, and all of a sudden you're getting a running back one in the third round. Or is that a situation you want to be kind of a little more apprehensive with?
It depends how I started my team, obviously, but I've taken him in the third round a few times because I think the window's going to close here real soon. I think it's August 1st, if I heard correctly, that they're going to make a decision on this. And if they come out and say, okay, nothing's going to happen this year, I mean, he shoots up to where? 1-2 turn late?
Yeah, I think he could jump. He could potentially be right there with like Fournette.
Yeah,
I think maybe a little higher. I think there's still question marks about the Saints offense, but you can't really paint a picture where Kamara is going later than the mid-second, mid to late second. I think and if he does have the positive reports, he'll be right there around the turn.
Yeah. So I've been taking him in the third when I can, but I've been in drafts where I was in a draft the other night and he went mid-second. Somebody jumped him, and if you think there's nothing to this, then that's fine. But we saw, I'm a little wary because I remember the Ezekiel Elliott suspension a few years ago, where he was suspended, I think like in week 10 or something, or 8, and then he appealed twice, and then he was out for the fantasy play. It was a nightmare, and
Disaster.
We could see something like that again, and nobody wants to see that. But that's the interesting play with him. It's how many games too. And I think a lot has to do with the Deshaun Watson thing. I think once that comes out, now you're hearing. Last I heard it was 8. They're thinking it's going to be 8 games. So if he gets 8, what's Kamara get? I mean, I think a lot of it depends on 2, and I don't understand this. I don't understand how the video hasn't leaked yet.
It's really weird, right? Like
very weird.
We know of a video. All these videos end up leaking. You'd think that one of these sites would get their hands on it, and some big money would change hands. But it's like under lock and key.
And they let him play in the Pro Bowl. Like he did this. That's the bizarre. I'm like, wait a minute here. So who knows what happened? We weren't there, obviously, and but yeah, it's a tough situation to play because if you take him, then you can I'll get Mark Ingram. Well, how comfortable do you feel with Mark Ingram in the backfield? So.
Yeah, I shout out to Andrew Schellenberg, another Goat District member. We had a football guys team that we split, and I made him take Mark Ingram, and I think he almost threw up. But I pounded the table for that one just in case you get a couple of starts.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned Deshaun Watson. Not even to get into that whole situation, but how do you handle drafting Browns? Is that an offense that you're avoiding, or do we get to a certain point where Chubb and Cooper, you see some overcorrection, and we could take it down to Kareem Hunt, who's starting to drop as well. Do you think it gets to be overcorrected, or do you think it's going to be just a horrific 8 weeks if Watson does get the 8?
I don't know how it's going to be horrific. I'm not really drafting Chubb at all because Chubb's generally a late second. Sometimes he falls into the third. He's just not the guy I want to draft for what I want to do with the teams that I'm drafting. Cooper's hard to draft for me. Somebody always takes him before I'm going to. He fell to the 7th in one draft, like one pick in front of me, and I was going to take him there. But I don't take Cooper very often. The guy I've been drafting a lot of, I have drafted Hunt because when Hunt falls to like the end of the 8th, I think it's a value there because we saw what Kareem Hunt can do when he's on the field. And I do think, obviously, if Watson's out, I think they're going to rely a lot on the run, between Chubb and Hunt. I think they're going to rely a lot on that. So we know what Hunt can do. And the guy I've been drafting a lot, though, is Njoku. I really think he's going to be a lot more involved this year in the offense. And it could be like a little safety valve for Jacoby Brissett this year.
I like that call a lot. And he's certainly getting
and he's cheap. And he's cheap. He's not, he's your second tight end. You can get him in like the 15th, 16th round. And, I just think there's limited options there. Harrison Bryant's still there, and he could be a pain as far as Njoku's value. But I don't think it's a bad pick. But, yeah, the Browns are not they're kind of in a void for me for the most part. There's a lot could go wrong.
Yeah, Cooper's been one I've avoided as well. I think it's kind of like the same thing we talked about with Alan Lazard, with obviously a much better player.
Right.
But they didn't give up much to get him. Cowboys kind of got rid of him with like a salary dump. And right. I just think that people want him to be more than I think he will be this year. And again, with the 8-game suspension potentially, I don't know. To me, there's a lot more exciting younger wide receivers that are going right around him. And if I want a veteran wide receiver, I could take Adam Thielen behind Cooper. And Thielen, I think, is in a much better situation. I still got a veteran receiver I like, and he's cheaper. So, yeah, it's that's one that I'm really not on as well. We had Glenn Lowy, yours and my league mate from the New York Super, and a great guy, great drafter on, and we briefly talked about some offenses that Glenn thought would be improved this season. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I think we often look at trying to find the next guy in fantasy football, but it sometimes can be really as simple as finding an offense that's mispriced, and all of their guys end up beating ADP. Is there any offenses that stand out to you that you think could make a big leap this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Eagles could be one for sure. They're a tricky offense because last year they started out, they were passing the ball a lot, and then they started running the ball a whole lot more the second half of the year, and they were much more successful. They made the playoffs. And you have the pieces there. You got Hurts, you got the running game. But, of course, when you add an A.J. Brown, that's a whole another element. And, personally, I'm not really on A.J. Brown this year. It's not that I don't like A.J. Brown. I think he's a phenomenal player. I just worry how much is he going to get in that offense. I'm a little concerned. I think Devonta Smith's a nice receiver, and he's going to get his. And then, of course, you have Goddard. So – it's like there's a lot to go around there, and then you have Hurts as a running quarterback. So, but I really think potentially they have the potential to be a much better offense this year. The Giants, same division. Giants definitely just bringing Brian Dable over is going to do wonders for them, in my opinion. And you have this fact Barkley. If Barkley's healthy, Kadarius Toney. You got a decent receiving core now. Daniel Jones. Better offensive line. So I think they're one. I guess Jacksonville. How could they be worse?
Yeah.
Urban Meyer's gone. They can't be worse. They paid Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk's a very polarizing player for me to wrap my head around because I like him. I liked him more as a complimentary receiver. Number 2. I don't know how he's going to handle being a 1 in Jacksonville. But they paid him a whole lot of money, so they're going to try to get him the football for sure.
I think he's like a lock for 20% target share. And if they want to justify the money, you could see a few more force-fed touches, and he's going to get downfield looks. So again, right. I'm kind of with you on that. I don't think a whole lot of people really, I'm not saying reach for Christian Kirk, but I think that it's kind of a funny thing where Jacksonville gives him an enormous amount of money, and he was effective last year for Arizona. He was a starting wide. If you had him in NFFC, you were starting him every week. They pay him a ton of money, and all of a sudden, every talking head is criticizing him as a player, saying it's way too much money, and it kind of carried on into his ADP, in my opinion. I think some people are just looking at him like he's some kind of a joke, but I think based on what they're paying him and based on his potential role, I think he's got a chance at being a wide receiver 2 this year. He's got a big range of outcomes, but I think like he's got a chance. So I'm with you on that one. What do you think of Evan Engram in that offense? Are you looking at a potential renaissance, or is that something you're just unexcited about?
I'm torn on that one because I am excited because Doug Peterson's the coach and we know how he uses his tight ends. I'm also then I think back to Evan Engram and I think about all the things he's always either hurt. He had this one, I don't remember what it was. They're playing the Eagles. He had this horrendous drop, and I'll never forget it. And I'm like, so he's dropped a lot of passes. So I wouldn't say, he's definitely not a tight end 1, but you could do worse as your tight end 2, I suppose. But it's not somebody I'm targeting. But if he falls to me, I need one, I'll take one.
Travis Etienne goes 27 overall recently. He's close to the second round. I've seen him go in the second round of a couple FFPC drafts, and he never lasts past like the 305. He's a guy I'm pretty excited about. What are your thoughts on Etienne? I'll add, do you think he's getting drafted kind of at his peak? Or do you think that this is justified and he could potentially rise up a little bit?
I think there's a chance he could rise up a little bit, but I think a lot like the big wild card here is James Robinson. James Robinson is back. If he's back and he's healthy, I don't think Etienne can get to the numbers that people want him to get to be a second round pick. However, if James Robinson's not back, he's pretty much the only show in town for right now, and he's got the potential. He was awesome to watch at Clemson. He was just awesome, and you're seeing all the workouts on Twitter. Of course, that's in pads, and you're just running through cones and stuff. But I think in the third round, I think 27 is appropriate right now. It will not shock me. Every year, it seems like there's one guy that always rises up. He's a second rounder, he's a third rounder, and then he's a second, and then he moves to like the turn. and it happens like Felix Jones. I don't know if you remember Felix Jones.
Absolutely.
That one, I'll never forget that one. He rose up like 3 rounds the last week because he had a couple big runs in preseason, and for all intents and purposes, he was terrible. So I'm not saying Etienne's terrible. I think he's going to be okay. I do worry about James Robinson a little bit. I heard a beat writer talking about Etienne, and he was talking about how that he struggled last year before he tore his ACL in pass protection. And I don't know if that's a problem still. I would hope not. That's something they can probably work on with him, because if you're struggling in pass protection, they're probably not going to have you on the field much on third down, which would cut into his catches a ton.
I would imagine that's something that, like, I think that can be worked on and that can be coached up. Unless you're just a dog who doesn't have effort in the blocking game, I think you can become a better blocker. And I will say that the Jaguars offense, if we do think they take a big step forward, I think they'll naturally take a step forward just because of rational coaching and Lawrence being a year older. And adding speed at wide receiver. But if they're going to take a real step forward and be like a potential top 15 offense, Etienne's going to have to be a really good receiver out of the backfield. We saw him get over 100 catches with Lawrence at Clemson. Yeah. So I'm on the bullish end for Etienne. I just worry about some of these guys like Michael Pittman, like Travis Etienne, where we might really like them, but they're starting to get drafted right at like the peak outcome, where you kind of lose some unknown upside by drafting them where you're drafting them. Although I drafted Travis Etienne, yesterday, so it's in a different draft, slow one. So what can I say? I wanted to dive in at the quarterback position with you. I think that you hear a lot of these pods, and people kind of take quarterback for granted, where you might like 7 guys and you might be willing to take a value, but I still want to get your thoughts on some of these guys and kind of where they're priced right now. Josh Allen, he goes 20 spots higher than any other quarterback in the NFFC. His ADP right now is like 34. And again, he's about 20 spots ahead of Mahomes and Herbert, who go neck and neck. I'm guessing you have Allen as QB1 overall.
I do.
Do you think the gap should be that big?
Probably not. You know what? One of my biggest fears with Buffalo, I really think, I think that team just got much better in the offseason, defensively, offensively. I think they're going to have a major chip on their shoulder after that playoff game because they should have never lost that game. But I potentially, and I don't think teams do this as much anymore because it would be too much. But my fear is that they're going to be sitting people week 17. But I don't think that's going to happen because then you sit 18, then you have a week off. So, but Buffalo's offense could be just spectacular this year. There's no question about it. And Josh Allen's just amazing because he runs touchdowns in. But no, I think Mahomes and Herbert are a lot closer than 20 picks to him, personally.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't see I have a little bit of Josh Allen, but like you, it's kind of when he fell. You see some of these people really, really want Josh Allen. And I think they view him as a massive difference maker, which he is. But again, if you wait, the tier gets kind of interesting because Mahomes and Herbert are sitting right there. Is there, and you don't have to commit to either one of them, but do you think that they're appropriately priced right now at 53 overall? They're literally neck and neck in the OC right now.
Yeah, I do. And I've seen them, like I said earlier to you, I was talking earlier to you, I've seen them go after 60, like into the 6th round. And when they're in the 6th round is kind of in the NFFC, to me, it's a dirty round. There's just a lot of players that have a lot of question marks. Not that, they all have question marks, but in the 6th round, there's a lot of players that I'm just not crazy about. And when I see those two quarterbacks sitting in there, it's a snap call for me. Like, I'm not even going to hesitate on that one because I think those two could be a definite difference makers at the position, especially with 6 points per touchdown.
It's the cheapest. It's potentially the cheapest you're going to see Patrick Mahomes for 5 years. If he comes out there and does Mahomes like things and figures out a way to make this receiver by committee great, or if he just pushes Juju and let's say Sky Moore is a top 30 wide receiver and Juju's wide receiver 20. Kelsey's tight end 1 overall. Everything's good, great in the world. He could end up being a real value this year. Herbert, to me, is interesting. I'm not sure I'd have him QB3 right now, which is why I haven't drafted him a whole lot. I have a little bit of him, but I'm maybe a little more excited about a couple guys in that next tier. Do you think that Herbert's just kind of like Teflon at his spot, or do you see a different kind of range of outcomes with the Chargers offense?
I think he's the 3. Personally, I think he's right there with Mahomes. I have them very close. I have Allen, and then I have the 2 of them, and they're close to that. And then, truthfully, the 4 is where it gets interesting for me because I think there's about 5 guys you could make an argument for, and they all could be number 4. So
so right now, if you follow this ADP, you go about 20 spots down from Josh Allen to Mahomes. It's technically 19 spots. Then you're about 18 spots down from the Herbert Mahomes tier to when you're starting to get a couple of these really interesting quarterbacks that I'm into. You've got Lamar Jackson. He's at 71. Kyler Murray at 75. Joe Burrow at 78. And then Jalen Hurts at 82 in kind of their own little mini tier. That's an interesting tier because you have 3 guys who can really, really run. I think all 4 offenses we're projecting to be, capable offenses that we probably would rank them somewhere in the top 10 NFL offenses with potential to do a little bit more. With that tier of quarterbacks, would you be specifically targeting one, or do you want exposure to multiple guys in that tier?
I want exposure to multiple guys in that tier. I like all 4 of them. I really do. And generally, in most drafts, one of those 4 will fall to the 8th round. It seems like, which, it's almost like take the one that lasts the longest, truthfully. Kyler's very interesting just because what he can do. Burrow, obviously the offense is fantastic, but he doesn't run. Lamar, I'm probably, out of all of them, Lamar's the one I'm probably the most hesitant on I'm a little concerned with his options this year. If Bateman is not what we think Bateman is, it could be a problem. It could be a real problem for him. He can run. We know that. But just pulling it all together. So, and last year he got COVID twice and he was banged up. Is that a trend? Is this something that's going to happen? Jalen Hurts is very interesting. He's very interesting. Was he one of the ones you mentioned?
Yeah, Hurts is right there.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
82. So you're 11 spots behind Lamar Jackson, but like you said, any given night he's going higher. The tier gets pushed up. Basically, those 4 guys go all within 10 picks.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, Hurts, I agree with you, is interesting. And like we said, I think the offense could score a ton. We have no question marks about their offensive line. It's one of the best in the league.
Right.
And Sirianni in year 2, I kind of like these second-year head coaches sometimes getting their footing. He seems like a smart coach because he switched the way that their offense performed based on his personnel, and he makes the playoffs. So like if they kind of make that offense a little bit more pass happy with Hurts' rushing ability. I mean, the guy had double-digit rushing touchdowns last year, so that's super interesting. Then we drop down to the next tier. This next tier is Russell Wilson. And you go down from 82 down to 95 where Russell Wilson is. So you're looking at about 13 spots of ADP. And then you see Russell Wilson, who goes right ahead of Dak Prescott. And Dak Prescott's basically, you can flip-flop him with Tom Brady. They're all kind of right there in that 3 quarterback room. I've seen Stafford get pushed up there, but I think it's more of a stacking, correlating, kind of forcing that. Like I think the Cup team will reach a little bit, or potentially the Allen Robinson team. So I kind of consider him a little lower. Does that tier appeal to you with Wilson, Prescott, Brady? And I took Brady last night with Nelson.
I prefer the other tier, obviously, the one before that. But those 3 are not. You definitely can win with those 3 quarterbacks. Brady's. How long have we all been saying? Oh, we always say we don't want to be on. We want to be a year early than a year late. But I'm not betting against Tommy. I mean, that's a losing bet because we've seen what he can do. Obviously, but it's going to be an impact for him because no Godwin potentially early on and got Gronk on. That's interesting. Russ is, again, I don't know how to handle Denver yet. Like, are they going to let Russ cook and just let him loose, or are they going to use the running game more? I mean, so he's interesting. Dak, I still like Dak, even with losing Cooper. I think he's going to be okay. But I think there are potential. I had Dak last year on a lot of teams, and it wasn't at the very end, but it was like weeks like 11 to 15 or something. He was just terrible. It was awful. So I'm a little jaded on that one. And losing Cooper, we don't know how that's going to affect him. So these guys definitely have a lot more issues, in my opinion, than the tier before that.
Do any of those 3 quarterbacks have QB1 overall in their range of outcomes? And if so, which one would it be?
I don't think QB1. No, I don't think they do. If there was one, oh boy,
it could be.
I guess it'd be Russ if they just went bananas and said, "Hey, you're just go at it." But then if that happens, then Javante's probably not going to be great.
Or Javante catches a shitload of passes, and
well, that's true too. But if is he going to be scoring a bunch? But you're right.
Yeah, no, I think you need things to happen for that. With, like you talked about, the Denver Broncos defense, the defense would have to underperform as well.
Right.
I think for that to happen. So that's kind of my issue with that tier is I like my teams when I draft them, but I know I'm not going to get like 2019 Lamar Jackson in the range of outcomes for my QB. Whereas if you go into that, the Burrow, Jackson, Murray, Hurts tier, you can kind of paint a picture that you could see QB1 overall, and you got them in the 70s. So that's kind of my thing. Burrow, to me, like you bring up Lamar Jackson, like I think Burrow's going to have a great season, but I think the lack of rushing ability, I don't think they're gonna let him run enough to really, really, really make that QB1 overall type smash season. So I don't know. It's kind of like I did draft Joe Burrow in a main event. I had Jamar Chase, and it was right after, like you said, I took him right after Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray were drafted. So I like him, but I'm not like over the moon with him. I might have him right behind Hurts if I'm ranking him. Now you get down to a guy who's super interesting, Trey Lance, who we like his offensive weapons. You drafted Deebo Samuel, George Kittle at tight end, Brandon Ayuk, who I think is a talented wide receiver who could really get behind the defense. A capable running game with a couple of question marks, but we know they're going to be able to run the football, and we love the head coach. So do you have enough confidence in kind of, what Trey Lance can do that you want some exposure to him? Or would he be a guy you'd want in like 2 QB builds?
Probably 2 QB builds right now. I would feel a lot more confident if Garoppolo's let loose. Because I think if Trey struggled at all and Garoppolo's still there, I think they might be a little quick to pull the plug on him. That's my main concern. The athleticism's off the charts. We know that. I have him, and I'm sure you're going to bring these guys up next with, Derek Carr and Cousins. I think they're in that range to get those 3 with Stafford and Rodgers. That's it for me. And then after that's where it really falls off.
So I see market kind of going a little harder at Lance now. I think he's the kind of guy where teams are going into a draft saying, I got to get Lance, and you're starting to see people reach for him. His ADP is up to 116. And then, I'm happy you mentioned Carr because that's a guy I like. We've never really seen Carr have this incredible smash season. He's always a guy that you kind of like, but it seems like everything's setting up for him. They gave Devontae Adams an absolute fortune. He gets one of the best wide receivers in the NFL to come to Las Vegas. He gets his former college teammate. They're very close. Adams mentioned that him and Carr have talked about playing together for a couple seasons now. I love that angle. He has Hunter Renfrow, who was a top 15 wide receiver last year, fantastic route runner. You can kind of envision him in a Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type role. And then he gets Darren Waller back, who I'm a big fan of. And I think that, talent-wise, he's top 5 tight end. Do you think that Derek Carr, this could be the year where he could really rise up and beat his ADP by 6-7 spots?
I do. I mean, I was talking about this the other day with a friend of mine. I said, is there a better team? Is there a better team out there that if you just take the top 2 receivers and a tight end? Is there a better team in football? And I can't think of one. Now, the Niners, you could argue, Deebo, Ayuk, and Kittle, but I would take the Raiders guys in a heartbeat over those 3.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a great way of looking at it. I didn't really think about it from that.
I mean, that's 3 major weapons in that offense. Yeah. Plus, the running backs can catch the ball. I mean, you're right. It's 100% set up for them, and they're in that division, so he's in a very good position.
You could almost look at him as a discount play from the Prescott, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Matt Stafford tier. Carr doesn't have the rushing ability. How much is Russell Wilson going to run in Denver? I think that remains to be seen. But Wilson certainly has the highest rushing upside. Dak also has a rushing upside there. But Carr is interesting to me. Like, I haven't minded setting up with like a Carr and then following him up with one of these maybe upside guys we're going to talk about next. Yeah. It seems to really be setting up for him. We'll see how it plays out. Kirk Cousins, I'm glad you mentioned, because that offense looks like it's going to be pass happy. He's got a ton of weapons. Justin Jefferson is either the first wide receiver drafted or the second wide receiver drafted pretty much every one of these NFFC drafts. We've seen a connection between Cousins and Adam Thielen. We saw KJ Osborne come on. He's got Irv Smith. And then this coaching staff has mentioned using Dalvin Cook more as a receiver, which is, it's so weird. If you think of Dalvin Cook as this great receiver, but he's never really had like that smash receptions year. So we love the weapons Cousins has, and we at least the way stylistically we like the coaching staff. Do you think Cousins could be a weekly QB starter. Do you think he's got that potential for this season to maybe be a top 10 type guy?
I do. I think if I looked at it today, I think he was QB8 last year in NFFC, just in total points. So if he was QB8 last year and we like everything and the new offensive coordinator, the new coaches there and everything else, I mean, why not? That's the way I kind of look at it.
It's wild Cousins being QB8. It's like if you asked 20 people that know football, where did Cousins finish in a 6-point passing touchdown league?
Right.
No one's going to say 8, unless they have it right in front of them. So yeah,
it surprised me.
Yeah, you're never gonna win Twitter if you post a draft board with Cousins as your QB, but you could certainly do worse, and it allows you to. I mean, you could potentially have a Carr Cousins team, and avoid drafting QB for a long time. They're interesting. Right in between those guys at QB 14 is Aaron Rodgers. We already talked about how we don't like the wide receiver weapons at all, and we have big time question marks. Is Aaron Rodgers a guy that you've drafted? And is it a guy that is he beat up, or is QB 14 about right?
I think it's about right because of Carr and Cousins. They're not, Aaron, if you ask somebody who are the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, they're going to say Aaron Rodgers is one of them, just because what he's done in the past. But fantasy wise, I just don't think you can put him in that class anymore just because of the receivers. We haven't seen it. I mean, Devontae Adams was his guy. I mean, they get inside the 5, and it wasn't even like they didn't even think about running the ball. It was either the quick slant to Adams or the quick, out real quick to Adams. So it's going to be a learning curve for him, I think. And, the last time, though, it was like 2 years ago. I think we all were down on Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Remember, he was going like in the 14th, 15th, and he smashed. So, again, he's one of those, he's like Brady. You want to bet against him? Yeah, you can. But I don't have a lot of confidence in him. I'm going to, if somebody else gets them in there right, then good for them. That's the way I'm kind of looking at it.
I think if you draft Rodgers, I think you really, really should try to get a couple of his wide receiver weapons. You got to, in my opinion, if you're making a bet on an offense you have question marks, you might as well make a bigger bet since you're already taking the QB of it. You could potentially be drawing dead, but I think if it plays out and Rodgers does come around and do Rodgers-like things, I think you'll end up playing out. That's not a bet I see myself making too often to go Rodgers, but I think if you are a Rodgers guy, decide a wide receiver or 2 and draft him, because right now you could easily draft Watson and like Amari Rodgers for nothing, and have 2 Green Bay wide receivers if you think they're going to beat ADP. And I definitely am not a Watson guy, but I think that's the way I'd play it if I'm drafting Rodgers. Right behind those 3 guys goes Justin Fields. There's about a 30-man gap from where Cousins goes at about 138 down to Fields at 167. So Fields is pretty cheap right now. Do you think that that's a guy that you could go with as your QB1 in a 2 QB build, or is that something where you would only feel comfortable having Fields as a QB2 at this point?
Yeah, I would not feel comfortable with him as a 1. I just, from what I'm hearing, I like what Chicago's doing. Getting rid of Matt Nagy was the best thing they did. But they seem to be, you see positive things coming out of Chicago, but you look at the weapons and you're like, okay, they have Mooney and they have Kmet and Byron Pringle's there and Velas Joe. I mean, it's just not a great thing. And and we saw Justin Fields struggle last year, but we also saw some of the good stuff he could do. I mean, he's got the athletic ability, no question about it. But I would not feel comfortable with him as a 1, but I do like him as a 2. I think he pairs up well with if you get a Cousins or a Carr, get that running upside quarterback as your number 2.
After Fields, it's hard to paint a picture on some of these guys. We can just go rapid fire here. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence as an offense you think would improve. Do you see him being a guy that people are using as a fantasy starter this year, or do you project him to be a little bit more of a QB2?
He's a QB2 in my mind. I don't see him being a starter many weeks, but I think there'll be some improvements for sure. I don't think he's going to be a starter. I don't think he'll finish top 12.
Yeah, I think that like QB 18 might be just a little bit high. He could still the team could still make big steps forward. But I just think that they lack elite playmakers for him to really make a big step. And I think it might be a little more, dump offs to ETN. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to see anything from Lawrence. Now, one offense that I'm intrigued by is Miami, and Tua is sitting there at QB 17. He certainly looked poor at times in his NFL career. Do you see Tua as a guy that could take a big step forward this year based on Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then also Gesicki Edmonds? He's got some guys.
Yeah. So when you're ranking them and you're kind of putting them where they're supposed to be, I think I had Tua like around 15 or 16. And like it comes down to the old adage, it's like, well, if Tyreek Hill's a top, second round receiver or early third, and Jalen Waddle's a third, and Gesicki's there, and Edmonds is there, shouldn't Tua put up decent numbers? I mean, that makes sense? So that's where he's one of my favorite quarterback twos to get, just because I think there is a little bit of upside from week to week with him. I don't know. He's going to have some games where I think, I think with is it McDaniels? Is that his name? Or what's his name? That's not McDaniels. The coach in Miami now from San Francisco.
Oh, yeah, McDaniel.
Oh, it is McDaniel. Yeah. So he, he's coming from San Francisco. They're going to try to run the football. They have how many running backs? They got what? You got Mostert. They got Edmonds. Sony Michel's down there. They're going to try to run the football, I think, a lot too. But you got some weapons as well. So I like Tua. I think he could be a decent number 2. I'm not. He doesn't. When I watch him play, he doesn't excite me. He's very blah. But I think just alone with the talent he has, around him, I think he could put up some nice stats this year.
Now I'm going to go ahead and skip Matt Ryan and Jameis Winston, unless you have something to add on those guys.
No.
So we'll go to one guy who's right behind them that I know we talked a little bit on the pre-show as a maybe a potential QB sleeper. Maybe tell me your thoughts on Daniel Jones.
I mean, I think he definitely could finish near the top 12 just because of his rushing ability. And with Daboll there, if he really, if they get this offense going, it's got potential. The flip side is, I think back to last year, and I believe they went like 7 weeks where I think it was like 7 weeks. And then they threw their first touchdown to a wide receiver or something. It was something ridiculous. I'm like, how does that happen in the NFL? But I do think Daniel Jones has potential. We've seen it his rookie year. I want to say he had like 2 or 3 40-point games.
Yeah.
He's got that potential to go off. So I like Daniel Jones a lot.
Yeah, and he's big too. Like a lot of these running quarterbacks, they don't have his size. He's deceptively big. I like Daboll a lot, and I think it's interesting you bring up their wide receiver room because it's an interesting room. Like you have Tony, who I like, and I think is a talented guy with a little bit of question marks. You have you can kind of paint a picture of Golladay being at least semi decent.
Right.
And then I like Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know how big of a fantasy impact he's going to make, but I think stylistically he helps them a ton. So they're interesting, and the offensive line should be better. The coaching is better. I think that Daniel Jones is one where you could do a nice 2 QB build with him. And I think if you're really you see some of these Deshaun Watson drafters thinking that they're going to close out the season with Deshaun. Daniel Jones could be a super, super cheap build to have a Watson with, roll the dice on Daniel Jones for 8 weeks. So I like him. And I think that, we might as well talk a little bit about Saquon Barkley because we're not talking about him in that Giants attack, but a healthy Saquon could just do wonders for that whole offense.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Saquon's one of those guys, I want to believe in him so bad. I want to see the rookie Saquon back because he was so exciting. He was so fun to watch. And I think everybody wants to see that. The question is stuff, or his injuries, are they freak injuries, just things that happen. Didn't he step on it was in Tampa? He stepped on the yard marker or something.
Yeah,
of course. And then last year he stepped on the ankle.
No?
Yeah, is it bad luck? I mean, maybe it's just bad luck because if that's all it is, I mean, this guy could be just phenomenal this year. And he was going early on in drafts. Like there were some deep draft champions. I was getting him in the 4th round, and it was just an automatic boom, boom, boom. And then now he's obviously creeped up, and he's, you see him at the end of the first, sometimes early second for sure.
He's definitely one of the biggest movers all summer. I mean, I think it's him and ETN. And then if you want to go back to the spring, I mean, we talked about Michael Pittman. He's gone way higher. But yeah, Saquon's up to 15 overall. I've seen him go in the first round in both NFFC and in FFPC, and I think he's going to be living at that 1-2 turn by the time we get to Vegas,
Right.
because everything's setting up, and I think you're seeing the market really come around on him. We've seen him have a 90 catch season, and he's a guy that we've taken number 1 overall, we've taken number 2 overall. So if he starts looking like the old Saquon, and they keep and the beat writers keep talking up his role in the passing game, I think that ADP will go up a little bit more. So I've actually really liked my teams where I've had second round Saquon. I know you mentioned getting him later, but second round Saquon is still super appealing to me. I have him ahead of like Fournette at this point. So he's super interesting. Is there any other quarterback worth talking about, Billy, that maybe I'm overlooking?
There's one quarterback that nobody has drafted in a 20-round draft, but I think he's a guy who could give you some sneaky starts. And he did last year. I want to say he was last so many weeks, he was like QB8 or something. It's Jared Goff. Because Jared Goff in that offense, I mean, think what they did with that offense now. I mean, last year, it was Amon-Ra St. Brown at the end of the year, and Swift was hurt and Gronk was hurt. Or not Gronk, sorry, Hawkinson. I'm gonna say Gronk. But you bring in Chark, Jameson Williams, from what I'm hearing, is gonna miss a good he'll probably be out for the first 6 weeks, it sounds like. But when he comes back, I mean, that's kind of a nasty offense. I mean, there's some playmakers there. So
yeah, big time. That's Billy Muzio is on them as well. He as one of his most improved offenses this year. That's a very interesting one. I mean, we've seen Goff have usable starts for the Rams, and I think that they've done a lot with that team. And just simply having healthy guys, like having Hawkinson and having Swift out on the field to go with their improvements at wide receiver. I think the offensive line is good. And I think that team is going to potentially score a lot of points. So I like that call with Goff. Maybe he's a guy I need to kind of open my eyes up to a little bit more as my QB2. Just quickly wanted to get we didn't touch upon tight end. What has been kind of your strategy with tight end so far? And do you see multiple paths at the tight end position? Or do you think that this is kind of a year where you want exposure to late tight ends or mid tight ends or early tight end?
I've mixed it up a little bit, but I've taken a few early tight ends. I've taken the Schultz, Hawkinson tier. I haven't done much with Kittle and Waller. I'm never in the right spot for them. When I'm at the end of the draft, they're too early in the 5th, and they never make it to the end of the 6th. So it's kind of like just where I am, but they're fine too.
You mentioned Njoku at tight end 20 right now.
Yeah. And there's tight ends in the back. I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to drop my tight end until like round 12 or 13. And, they're like, oh, well, Komet's going to break out and stuff. But we've done this a lot where we say, oh, and, I'm not saying Komet's a bad play because I like him too. Everybody does. But, there's also a path where he goes, 60 for 580 and 2 touchdowns. Which that's not going to really set the world on fire for you. So, I mean, I like to, it's nice to have a good tight end. And I think that 5th, 6th round, 7th, 5, 6, 7 area, when you're talking about the Kittle, Waller, Hawkinson, Schultz, and some people throw Goddard in there. I really don't. I think he's a little bit back behind them. I think that's a nice range to be targeting because I think they're going to give you decent value. And if you want, I'll take an Andrews or a Kelsey or something when I just don't like the players. I don't feel like reaching for somebody. And I'm like, well, I know what I'm getting with these guys. They're safe. So
yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at them. And it's kind of like a big tight end dead zone. Like I like Komet. I know there's certain people who we know who are very sharp that are on Irv Smith. And there's a few other guys like that. But it's funny. It's like you can wait and you can kind of paint yourself a picture where those tight ends going like tight end, 18 through 24, you might like a guy there a little bit more than like tight end 12 this year. it really like that Hawkinson, Goddard, Ertz tier, and then it's like 20 spots before another tight end is picked after that. So it's kind of a funny position. I'll be interested to talk to you when we get to the end of the summer and see which way you went with tight end, because I think it's kind of wide open right now, and I think that it's kind of a position where you can have a number of approaches and still have a nice winning team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's the easiest position to put off, to where you can look at a roster and you can say, "Oh my gosh, look at my I'm stacked at running back, I'm stacked at receiver, I got a great quarterback, but my tight end's Tyler Higbee or something." Well, that's probably going to hurt a little bit. You're going to get stung every week on that. So, but it's the easiest position to disregard is pretty much what I'm getting at.
And then last season we saw Dalton Schultz and we saw Dawson Knox both be waiver wire ads. The year before we saw Tunyon. We saw Pat Freiermuth last year. He was on a lot of waiver wires in the NFFC before he broke out. He finishes tight end 13-ish. But if you go by like the second half of the year and the splits, he was a lot more impactful. Why do you think it's a position where we find guys on the waiver wire and maybe fail to recognize those guys like the deep sleepers like we would at like running back?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, with Schultz, I mean, you think about it, all three of those tight ends, what they were doing is they were all – Schultz especially was getting a lot of volume. Yep. But Freiermuth didn't get a ton of volume as much. It was he and Knox were just scoring. And, we all like – and
Tunyon the year before was living on touchdowns.
Right. I mean, look, I think most of us, if you're going to just disregard tight end, I think most of us would be happy with 3 for 40 and a touchdown every week. Give me 13 points, I'll walk away. That's great. And that's what those guys were doing. So I think it's a position. There's always it seems like I guess there wasn't a ton of injuries last year. I know Hawkinson was out for a little while, and I guess Waller was. Yeah, I guess it was. Never mind. Waller was out. So I think got people a little desperate. But you're right. There's always players you can pick up that can be stopgaps, but they're not going to be league winners in my mind. Although Dalton Schultz, he was pretty darn good down the stretch.
Yeah, and I think it's that my big takeaway with some of the waiver wire tight end success is don't ignore the early season games. I think a lot of times we go crazy after week 1 waivers where it's one of the most beneficial weeks of the entire season. But I think you really have to look at like the snap share, obviously the targets for some of these tight ends, because sometimes it just sticks. I remember after that first game where Schultz had, I believe, 7 catches on that Thursday opener, and people kept dismissing him. Then he'd have 6 catches, he'd have 7 catches, and it just kept going. So I think that you can find waiver wire help at tight end, but not usually in the middle of the year. It's usually early on. So this was awesome tonight. We're at a $1.23. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the Black Book, what you wrote about this year, Billy, so they can check that out?
Yeah, I wrote an article about draft champions. Best ball this year. Just a way to go about it, and it's a pretty basic article, just kind of for the novice to read, as well as somebody. And I threw in some things like players you want to be shooting for, and you really. One of my philosophies with best ball is you don't worry always about the upside. You got to look at the downside, and I think Terry McLaurin was a huge one last year. He had I can't remember how many games. I think he had 9 games under 10 points or something. He was a killer, in best ball. So you got to look at that. But it was just an article on that. So.
No, that's awesome. The Black Book's always a good read. Highly recommend it, especially for people going on vacations. You want a little something to read. What's better than reading about fantasy football? This was a blast, Billy. We'd love to have you back on another time soon. And I'm just a couple of weeks away from going head-to-head with you in New York and Vegas. So that's going to be definitely a challenge, but I'm excited to do it. Have a great rest of your summer, and everybody have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Appreciate it.